Hello and welcome back to the Evolution of Medicine News Videocast. It is Saturday, the 9th of April, and for a not so regular occurrence, I'm actually here in California together with my partner at the Evolution of Medicine, Gabe Hoffman. Here he is. Welcome, Gabe.
Hey, good to be out here on the West Coast for once.
We're very excited to be bringing you the news this week, and this week the news is brought to you by Igbo. Igbo is the Uber for phlebotomists. If you're watching the Functional Forum on Monday night, you know that we did a whole thing about Igbo. We had Dr. Shave Kapadia on the show. Definitely go back and watch it if you didn't. I think it was one of our best forums. Chris Kresser rocked it, and the rest of the show was great. Dr. Bredesen, Stephanie Daniel. Go and check it out, but thanks so much for Igbo for sponsoring. If you're using labs, you should definitely be using Igbo to make it super easy. So this week on the news, we're going to do a little bit of we got basically a special guest, news curator, and it's someone that actually Gabe and I haven't really met. His name is Dr. David Ludwig.
He doesn't know he's our guest.
He doesn't really know he's our guest, but he is an endocrinologist and researcher at Boston Children's Hospital and Harvard Medical School. He's a #1 Times best-selling book of Always Hungry that came out recently. But basically, he's got an awesome Facebook feed, and I've been following him on Facebook for a couple of weeks, and he's just putting really cool articles that are really relevant to the news. And so I just thought we could go through some of the articles that he's been either writing or posting. So check him out on Facebook. It's facebook.com/David Ludwig MD. So the first thing, and this is something he wrote on Medium this week that caught my eye, which was that essentially there's declining life expectancy according to new CDC data. A 10-point plan to restore healthy food as a national security priority. So in 2005, colleagues and I predicted in the New England Journal of Medicine that life expectancy would decline in the US by the mid-century due to the obesity epidemic. He was stunned to see evidence and prediction in preliminary data just released by the CDC that essentially it's already happening. And so he goes through in this whole article here to talk about essentially not only that it is happening, but also that he has a 10-point plan for overcoming it. So, Gabe, you took a look at this this story. What do you think about it?
Well, the first thing about it is we have talked about the risk or the chance that we would have a declining life expectancy for the first time, and now it's here. So it's no longer something we're just thinking about. It's something that's happening, and it's odd too because you think about how much more awareness we have about health, how much more we talk about health these days, and to regardless still be moving in that direction. You wonder if it's just we haven't the information that's exchanging. Like through social media, through the internet, that's very health-minded, hasn't caught up yet with the statistics and with all the momentum we had developed in the commercialization of the food and, pollution and all these other factors we know about today. Maybe we just are, there was so much momentum with the train going that way that it's taking time to see the benefits of that. Or if similar to cigarettes, it's like everyone knows they're bad for you, and you see it all on TV, and yet everyone's, who smokes cigarettes continue smoking cigarettes.
Well, I think also it's just like, you get in this own little bubble where we think, oh, everyone's healthy now. And actually that's just a tiny bubble in New York or LA, and there's the majority of the country where, it's still in the early adopter phase of people taking care of themselves. But obesity keeps going up. These numbers keep going up. I thought it was pretty cool that he had a 10-part plan.
Well, and if you look at the 10-part plan, I think what you just said is a great point that, we live in maybe these coastal bubbles, but his 10-point plan really addresses not just the coast, but is looking at how to make shifts that you could tell when you read them are affecting the whole of the country.
So let's just nip through these top 10. I'd love to hear your thoughts at home as to what these 10 are and your thoughts on them. 1, create an intergovernmental food policy commission. 2, reform the process of revising U.S. dietary guidelines. 3, tax all processed food and restaurant fast food. 4, regulate food advertising. 5, minimize conflicts of interest amongst academics and professional nutrition societies. I like that one. 6, adequately fund schools so they can offer high-quality breakfast and lunch. 7, design new restaurant options. 8, we're already seeing some pretty good some disruption in that space. Formulate healthier processed foods, vote with the ballot, and vote with the fork. I mean, it seems pretty, good ideas. I guess the biggest thing to say is that we've been saying for a while that the curve, the life expectancy curve was flattening. For the first time now, you're just seeing that, the flattening is turning into actually going down. So hopefully this puts pay to all the people who say, hey, listen, we're healthier than ever been. We're living longer than we ever have. Technology is going to save everything. everything. No, there is a problem, and we need to be at least awake and aware of the problem, and hopefully this is the first step towards doing that. So anyway, this was a great article. You can follow him on Medium. Medium's a great place to find. He posted this 3 days ago, and this is what started this train. And so now I'm following him on social media, and I'm starting to see what else he's doing. So the next article that he put up this week was actually about fat in the body. So, circulating biomarkers of dairy fat and the risk of incident of type diabetes amongst U.S. men and women in large prospective studies. So this is 3,000 people per study, 3,333 adults. So it's a big study, and the conclusion is higher plasma dairy fatty acid concentrations were associated with lower incident of diabetes. The results were similar in this. Our findings highlight a better need to understand the potential health effects of dairy fat and dietary and metabolic determinants of these fatty acids. I mean, essentially, this was only accepted, this week, in March. So this is essentially saying that, full fat dairy is probably, healthy for you and helps you to avoid diabetes. So, we try to avoid, I guess, these kind of conversations on this because, it's very divisive, but it seems like this is a big study and, may help you realize that if you're going to have dairy, it should be full fat, should be like as nature intended, I guess.
Well, and you'll see now everyone will interpret the interpretation. So it'll be like, is it the full fat dairy, or is it just increasing saturated fats, or is it that the saturated fats replaced vegetable oils in their diet because you can only fit so much fat in, and actually removing the vegetable oils is what improved their health. So there will now be a million different spins off of the one study. And look, it's always good to see information that is actually following a good amount of, a larger amount of people in a study that's around nutrition, because we need more data when it comes to that type of thing versus all these pharmaceutical studies and things that get tons of money put towards them. So, interesting information, and something that will lead to a lot more questions and a lot more books, most likely.
Yeah, a lot more books and a lot more sales of these books. We're going to talk about this a bit later, but I had the opportunity to meet Dean Ornish, and I think there's like a rivalry between Ornish and then like Hyman and Ludwig on like fat and dietary fat. And I would just say, it seems to me that like basically everyone agrees on like 99% or 95% of what's needed. We need love and community. We need exercise. We need meditation. But everyone, it's almost like with the election, right? All the candidates have a lot of similarities, and then you end up focusing on the like tiny things that people disagree, and it seems like a chasm. Whereas actually, like if you want no war, or if you need no GMOs, it's not really like a candidate to go for. Whereas in especially in things gone by, elections gone by, and it's the same thing in nutrition. Like I'm sure Hyman, Ludwig, and Ornish on a panel together agree about 99% about what it takes to keep people healthy, but these chasms develop over like dietary fat, and there's no studies to prove this and whatever. And I think one of the biggest things we need to just think about is like how are things similar rather than how are things different.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, debate, I guess when you find two polarizing opinions and you can debate them, it like creates a lot of energy and it creates a lot of emotion, and so it creates a lot of attention. Whereas if everyone was like, we all agree about these things, maybe it's sort of flat, or it might be human nature to pursue that. But at the end of the day, yeah, I mean, you could see that the actual specific foods people should eat are all across the board, and maybe everyone's a bit different. Maybe that's not the case. But you're right, like where can we agree, and how do we make that the front page of all of this information about health? And what people typically agree on is like you have to exercise a bit. Now, some people say you should only do, sprints versus long distance running, but let's just forget that and say exercise people agree on, stress reduction people agree on, relationships, love, and community people agree on. So if you apply those things to your life, and then like it gives you a lot more margin of error when it comes to foods. If those other things are a mess, then it's like maybe you have to be so exact on what foods work exactly for your body, and maybe we don't have the tools to know the answer to that. But what we do know is the more information that comes out that's conflicting about nutrition, the more that the pendulum is swinging like widely and selling books to each side of that argument, the raw food people and the cooked food people and everyone else in between.
Exactly. Well, look, we're trying to be a force of collaboration. And, Dr. David Perlmutter, who's going to be featured on the next functional forum, spoke about groupers versus splitters, like splitting things up into the finest parts. That's how you have the ICD-10 codes with these insane things. And in groups, if you can group symptoms, if you can group things together, that's the new way that we have to think about things. And so I think this is, sort of perfectly set here.
And to be clear, like the people who are doing this work and are passionate about the information that comes out, and Dr. Perlmutter and Dr. Hyman, they believe what they're doing. So it's not like people are just trying to cause disputes and divisiveness just to sell books. It's just that's a natural outcome of the fact that there are passionate people on both sides of the argument, and that these things have worked for, like, both approaches have worked for some people and not worked for some people. So I think overall what we know about our community and about the doctors who are leading the way here is the heart is in the right place. The question is just how can we create a little more stability in the conversation, so people don't forget these key pieces, these important pieces, so that our health can improve. Because if we just look at the last article about declining life expectancy, maybe it's like when you change your diet drastically every 8 months because you read a new book, that's actually not helping you as much as really if you focused on these things that we know are important. So
yeah, absolutely. So look, some other cool stuff that Ludwig has showed this week. This is from JAMA, and this was basically on the price of insulin. So now we have type 2 diabetes. Everyone needs insulin injections. The price of insulin has tripled in the last 10 years. So that Medicaid reimbursements have increased for both human insulin and more costly analog insulins. Studies of prescription person changes in excess medical spending of U.S. adults with diabetes on prescription medication. So, essentially what Ludwig was saying here when he reported on it on his Facebook page was like, look, here's a disease that's, 100% pretty much, or, he said 100% reversible or preventable in type 2 diabetes. And yet, look, here's the cost of actually dealing with it once you have it, injecting yourself with insulin. And just saying there needs to be some sort of regulation of these costs because, the pharmaceutical industry, if you need insulin, there couldn't be anything more. You need it, at every moment. And then, of course, we can jack up the price. that's just straight economics. If you're not price sensitive, if you have to have it, if you jack up the price, you're going to make a ton of more money. I just feel like this is a pretty dark thing to think about. But, all the medicines that are quote unquote always necessary. And if you have type 2 diabetes, you need this. It's kind of a crazy situation that you would have this under the control of a profit-making enterprise, they can see. And that's why you see that guy, going back to our first ever news, Martin Shkreli, now in prison, for jacking up the price. This is insulin. This is something that's, made within the body potentially and not made properly or not made enough. And, just the price gouging is something that just leaves always a bad taste in the mouth.
And you could see that maybe it's a strategy to do that with things that people can't live without. Maybe someone can live without Viagra. They would rather not, but maybe they could, or that's easier for them to find some of the natural remedies. They're exercising more and all of a sudden they don't need it. Whereas, something like, type 2 diabetes, if you have access to the right information, has shown to respond really well. But insulin is one of those drugs that the people who are on it typically stay on it. And so if you're a company that wants to up your profits, you can pretty much just price gouge the ones that people are staying on, simply also what they've done with, the HIV drugs and that type of thing.
Absolutely. All right. So this is an interesting one, and I just think this is, something it's just interesting and in the news and on Ludwig's Facebook page.
And something we touched on the forum.
Yeah, we'd spoken about, and this is something that we touched on the forum a couple of months ago too, which is essentially we had Penelope Jagessa-Schaefer in the December forum, and she spoke about, well, now they're, this is from the Endocrine Society. So, to catch you up if you don't know, but last year the Endocrine Society, which is sort of like the organization that's responsible for the endocrinologists and representing them, came out to say, okay, there are toxins, and yes, they're causing big effects on the endocrine system, and we need to take care of. We need to look at endocrine disruptors as a serious impact in health. And so now there's this study that's coming out from the Endocrine Society essentially saying, look, we thought bisphenol A was bad, we proved it was bad, and now everyone's switching over to BPS, and BPS is essentially just as bad. So the conclusion here right down at the bottom was, in summary, show for the first time that BPS can induce lipid accumulation and differentiation in primary human and essentially just showing that this is, BPS is just as bad. This study suggests that BPS may not be a harmless substitute for BPA, and more through toxicological and epidemiological investigations of BPS effects on human health are warranted. I mean, so this is like, again, in December, Penelope was like ahead of the curve on this because it's the first time that it's coming out.
Well, just if we make everything about getting rid of one toxin, and then we don't ever ask the question about what are we replacing it with. And that was the point of her talk, which was, look, you're replacing it with something, and it's just a matter of time before you find out the problem with that thing. So if we get too amped up about BPA free and don't talk about like what its BPS full mean, then pretty quickly you're going to find out that was a problem. And it's very exciting to sell products that have this BPA free thing. It catches your eye. Now people have heard of it, and it's part of the selling of things. And we have to, I don't know what the solution maybe is. I mean, clearly you got to change. You're going to take out the toxins, but we have to get away from plastics completely. I mean,
well, I don't think putting plastic in the microwave, whatever it agrees, is probably not always going to be the plan, especially if you're going to serve it to a child. So obviously glass and, the kind of things. But, I was at an event this morning and I had some coffee and they had these polystyrene cups and I was like, but I had some coffee.
You got to be in the world.
You got to be in the world.
You be in the world and live in the world and still be smart about it, as smart as you can be. But yeah, I mean, it's not shocking, but it is helpful. So like the BPA thing goes to the BPS, and now maybe the trend is we think a lot more carefully about what are we making things out of rather than just what are we not making things out of. Similar to our bodies, so much of what we do with our bodies, like avoid this, avoid that, avoid this, but getting focused on like what do we actually want to put in our bodies. There's a big, backlash with the gluten-free industry because it's like, okay, this is gluten-free, but then you look at what it's made of and there's like 50 ingredients to make it taste pretty good but be gluten-free, and then was that really the thing you needed to do for your health?
Yeah, you got crazy, you're eating still crazy amounts of like wheat paste, like essentially, or tapioca flour. Yeah. Anyway, so hopefully this is interesting. If you've never followed David Ludwig before, good reason to follow him. I think he's got some good stuff, and certainly stuff that's in line with the forum, stuff that we've had on before. Really cool to be able to sort of curate the news of someone and put you in a direction of hopefully someone that's interesting for you to follow. If you're doing patient education for your community on Facebook, you can have all your patients, follow your clinic, and then you can follow people like David Ludwig, and you can just share all this stuff out. Super useful for all of your patients. We're going to be bringing you some new patient education ideas on future forums and in other ways. We think that, patient education is a huge part, and having some sort of automation is a big way to do it. So check out his Facebook page. It's David Ludwig MD. Seems like a good dude and someone to follow. It's been great to be here for the news videocast, Gabe. Great to do this in person. Normally we're across the country from each other.
It's true. Yeah, we're live in the West Coast, and it's a bit warmer than the East Coast still. So I guess things haven't changed too much.
Good place to be. Anyway, thanks so much for being here on the news. This is the Evolution of Medicine news videocast. Again, thank you to Igbo for sponsoring this. Igbo is one of the companies that when people ask, like, oh, who are your sponsors? We're really proud to have them as a sponsor. They're doing cool stuff. I've used them myself.
Thinking outside of the box.
Yeah, thinking outside the box to come up with solutions that really improve the efficiency of chronic disease management. That's another thing. We're going to be talking a lot about patient education moving forward. We're also going to be talking a lot about practice efficiency. And there are technologies. We only have companies like HealthWave, like Igbo, like Embody 360. All the sponsors of our podcast are companies that make it significantly easier to be successful in improving the efficiency of your practice. And we need more efficiency. You can't be seeing people for an hour and a half all the time for every patient because there's just not going to be enough chronic disease care to come around. And so that's going to be a big focus for us in the next few months. Thanks so much for being here with us. We love getting your news stories. Send them to news@goevomed.com. Some of these, we get good stories every week, and next week we'll go to more stuff from our community. But this has been the Evolution of Medicine news videocast. I'm your host, James Maskell, here with Gabe Hoffman, and we'll see you next time.